Hello, my name is Jorb. I love gear, and this is the Chase Bliss Audio Mood Mark II. Mood is a totally unique pedal. Its architecture and its controls are really not like anything else I've ever used. The sort of, let's say, back-of-the-box description, Mood is a two-channel pedal. One side is delay-based, time-based effects, and the other side is a really short looper, a micro looper, they call it. And they share a clock in the middle, and they can have their audio routed back and forth between them. My sort of emotional analogy description, Mood feels like if you took every moment of surprise you found while you were playing with a delay or a sampler or a looper, if you isolated a bunch of those like wow moments and made them all really, really accessible. Things like spinning the time knob while there's audio in the buffer of a delay pedal, or playing a sample back at a different sample rate and finding something special about that, toggling a delay pedal on and off while constantly playing something in, like all of those messing with gear moments of magic, Mood really highlights those. And it extrapolates. It gives you sort of creative ways to manipulate them, creative ways to capture them, and ways to one after the other combine them and slowly build up, step by step, this complete texture. And nothing else I've used is like that. So many delay or granular or like described as ambient, marketed as ambient pedals are about manipulating this big picture thing to be washing ambient. One button and suddenly you're there. And Mood, as far as I interpret, really wants you to focus on moments. And that's an approach I find really engaging, I guess, but only once I let myself be surprised, which I've mentioned before is not normally where I like to work. I'd rather be impressed than surprised. But Mood kind of manages both. It's impressive in the instant, and it's surprising once you combine some things. Regardless, if you don't need like control details or specific examples, you can ignore the rest of this video and just my tips, my few like bullet point tips for working with Mood. Focus on the moments, remember how you got there, and let yourself be surprised. Yeah, I'm very happy to say this video is sponsored by Chase Bliss. Scott, thank you for letting me take so long. If you're a subscriber or a patron, I really appreciate your support. If you aren't either, or if you just want to support me in another way, I have affiliate links in the description. I can get a kickback if you use that link, no matter what you buy. Even with cutting out tons of rambling, this video is super long. So if there's a specific thing you want to learn about or reference, use the chapters to scroll around. That's why they're there. But I think this is probably best watched in whole segments, or at least in longer segments. I want my videos to feel like you've asked a friend if they would show you something they love. So sometimes I might skip a detail, or I might cover things in a weird order. I might focus on something that you don't think is a big deal, or the box, the manual might not think is a big deal, but that's the way it came to me while I was demonstrating. That's the way my brain and my creative centers, whatever, connected these things, so that's the way I'm going to present it. I'm not a professor. I'm not reciting out of a manual. I don't script anything when I'm on the table. I'm a hobbyist who got out of control. and I like that perspective for presenting. The downside is sometimes a video like this ends up being close to an hour. But it's something I'm excited to talk about because I like it. And anyway, I'm literally already rambling. Let's just get onto the pedal. Here we are on the table with Mood. I'm using just the Rephase CP. I find that the electric piano sounds, you get these really identifiable transients, and you can hear the life cycle of a complete note and really pick it out and do a better job identifying what Mood is doing than a lot of synth sounds. So I'm going to demonstrate with that for a while, and then eventually I'll change some other things. But Mood is two channels. The left side is a wet channel. You can think of that as all variations on delay in its like most basic form. It really does a ton. And the right side is a micro looper. This is all about capturing some element of sound, and then that's being manipulated or played back in slightly different ways. And in the middle is controls that are going to relate to both sides. But we'll go a little slower than that. Let's just start with the left side. And on the delay mode, which should be the simplest to understand. So we have time and feedback. Here's a shorter time. Here's a slower time. And you see it pulled back more of the buffer as I went up. This is a digital delay that does not stretch the buffer as you change the time there. And modify down here is feedback, and we'll go infinite if I put it all the way up. Great. Lower feedback to get that to remove. Already we're going to go into this middle section, which are controls that affect both sides, and I'm going to change the clock. Notice that changed our delay time effectively. I'm going to turn the feedback really high. Load the buffer full of stuff, and you can hear that it gets shifted down. So for this delay setting on the wet channel, this time does not stretch your buffer, but the clock does. And it also introduced at lower clock settings this aliasing low fidelity thing. And so now we just have a lo-fi delay. Which, you ask me, sounds pretty good in and of itself. But that delay is about the simplest part of mood. That's the only thing that I think requires no serious additional explanation or new understanding. And is still so much fun to play with, and really sounds good on its own. So there's a few reasons I find mood difficult to present, and they're all to its credit, okay? It is so flexible in an individual effect. So even just with this delay, you might be like, oh, cool, that's all we need to see with the delay, right? We have our feedback, our time, and our clock, which will stretch. But if I do something like that, and then I launch the feedback all the way up, it'll drone. Then, of course, I can change the clock. Shift the pitch of it. A reverb after this, suddenly this is a complete ambient effect. I wouldn't need to do anything additionally. Or, what if I stretch out time while there's stuff in the buffer? Then we get this sort of different effect. So, sort of the stretching of the buffer introduces these dips in the sound. Or if I want it to fade, reduce the feedback a little, then kick it back up. There's all sorts of playing to be had with what seems like the simplest effect on here, and I want that to be our introduction to everything Mood can do. It feels like this collection of ambient elements, and with a little manipulation, any one of those single segments can be a complete ambient sound. And then think of the power once you combine them, and these things get really, really, really flexible, really, really fast. And I've started thinking of these mode selectors less as, oh, the pedal is functioning differently, and more as I have access to manipulating these time-based effects in a different way. What do we get from choosing the delay mode on the wet channel? That lets us manipulate this in terms we're really familiar with, feedback and time. And the stretching time of the clock. So that's like, okay, that's a way that makes sense for me to interact with the delay. If you're familiar with pedals at all, that'll make sense to you. And let's say, oh, I want a sound to hang out forever. Well, on the delay, you would do that by turning feedback all the way up. And of course, it works here. And then you can manipulate everything else you have access to and build an ambient sound that way. Great, I think I made all my points for that. This one might go a little quicker. This is the Reverb, which our two controls are time, and this time will stretch your buffer. You do get pitch shifting if you change it while things are in there. And at this far left on Modify, this is sort of a spread. I'm actually going to look and see how the manual describes it. A diffusion, maybe, is what I would say. They say smearing in the manual, which I think is probably more indicative of what is actually happening. But at lower time settings especially, you can hear that it is sort of a stuttering, scattered delay. And Modify this smear. Let's get it pretty high up. You get less definition in those individual repeats. Let's go all the way up, and you're really going to hear this when I turn the time. So a little bit less to explore, but just again, here's a different set of controls for a similar effect. So it's still a delay, but now we have this sort of multi-tapping, and we can bend our time with the clock or with the time knob. We want it to be a lo-fi thing. Set our clock a little lower. We get the aliasing in. Compensating time here, since we've reduced the time of the clock. Is Nyquist frequency the right word for that? I think it is. And to think about that idea I said earlier, like, oh, you have access to different elements, different control elements, the clock will always be a way for you to introduce this low fidelity thing. Almost like a low ring mod actually here. But a bit reduction, a Nyquist frequency, all that sort of stuff. That also has implications for time. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Okay, that's actually what I'm going to show you with Reverb. Go to the third one here, Slip. Let's just listen to Slip. Clock a little faster. So there, you're hearing a single delay, same pitch, right? So slip is this like single delay, but this is how pitch shifted it'll be when it comes back out. And this time on top is sort of, not exactly a delay time, it's sort of the window that'll get passed in the slip. It's how long, or how wide, I guess, of a slice will get passed into slip. I'll make it even shorter, a lot shorter. You hear a bunch of little slices getting shifted, right? Let's turn the clock up. And so that'll speed up our time here, right? So we have even smaller windows. Let's crank them both. Full wet mix. The sort of imperfect pitch shifting. If we make it lower than the original pitch, a lot of that artifaction will be lost. Let's bring back in the dry signal here. So I've only been on the right side of the modify control here. If I go over to the left, at neutral, in this middle, Nothing, right? Move a little bit to the left. Let's do a slower clock, lower time. This is a reverse delay now. There's our sort of reverse element. Or our pitch shifting, and again, there's that idea, okay, what does slip give me access to? Slip gives you access to a delay that can run in reverse and pitch shifting. So if that's a component of your finished ambient sound, that's what you need to be using this tool, the wet channel, for. Really, really like that. Okay, so there's everything on the wet channel. Now the micro looper is going to be a little confusing at first. I promise you it'll make sense. And so much of the magic in Mood comes from combining these two things. And so I'm going to turn the clock up, and let's watch how often this red light flashes. So that is the length of our micro loop at our highest clock speed. We'll go somewhere in the middle. And the way you put something into the micro looper isn't just pressing it. See, I've engaged it and you don't hear anything special, right? So if I turn that off and I turn back on our wet channel, and you just play while that side is disengaged, that's what gets put into the buffer of the micro looper. Great. And you can see every time it flashes, that's when we cycled once around. Clock does exactly what you would think it does. Sort of stretches the whole loop we've got here. There are 3 modes, envelope, tape, and stretch. We're on tape right now. On tape, this top control is our length of our loop. So I can manually set it to something really, really low. And then this is a playback speed that's disconnected from clock. And anything to the right is forward, up to double speed, which we can then offset with the clock knob. Anything to the left is reverse. Why don't I'm going to get something else in the buffer here. Something pretty solid, little ambient in the buffer. I'm going to set our controls on the wet side to reverb. Turn that on. Because, by default, this is routed through the wet channel. The micro looper goes through this side. And that is our option in this middle here. So I can run just the input through the wet channel, the input and the looper, or just the micro looper. Here again, sort of that toolkit idea comes into play. If I want some washy pad that's then running through reverb, I can use the right side here to be my looping droning source, and I get the reverb, I get the ambiance from this left side. And then I could either use the reverb from this wet channel as well, or the delay. There it is. Or the delay on my dry sound. Running on just my dry sound, not the loop. Or let just the micro looper go through. Reverb's a better example. I'll leave it there. Just the micro looper through the reverb, and then this pass through undisturbed, and maybe I'll add my own reverb and delay here. it really becomes like annoyingly flexible. Sometimes there's so many possibilities at any given moment. Anyway, so back to just the micro looper. To further explain something that I sort of went right over, it is always listening. So all that stuff I just played while this was bypassed, that's what's going in here. Now I can stretch the length to be small slice, or to be something a little bigger. Tape lets me play it in reverse. Clock speed, of course, affects it. All that's still true. But that routing thing, sort of important to understand. And also, here's another little example. If I have the wet channel on, there you go. I had the wet channel on while the micro looper was bypassed, and it captured that delay in the loop. So now I've garnered our reverse element from the tape option on the micro looper side, but the delay came from the left side, from the wet channel. And now I want to wash everything out a little bit with the reverb. So you can get these sort of like tiered approaches to building an ambient sound. It's crazy unique. It's crazy different. And now this is the first time I'll bring up, there's a bunch of hidden functions where you control these two buttons at the same time. I find myself using them a lot. And there's some that I really, really wish we had full access to. I know this might be blasphemy, but if there was ever a time for Chase Bliss to use an enclosure that's maybe double, 2.5 times wide, I think this really would have benefited from it. But I completely recognize that Chase Bliss invented, effectively, this formatting of a pedal, and now we see it everywhere. It's so a part of their identity. I wouldn't expect them to do anything else. But regardless, the first sort of hidden effect I'm going to show you here, this lets us bring in dry micro loop as we're passed through the channel here. So I'm going to put it about halfway. So we have some of the clean micro loop through the reverb as well. But here we are again. A sort of piecemeal constructed ambient sound. And what if I got a slip and I reverse our reverse elements? And I blended some of the dry or direct micro loop. And then I play over it. So that example fell apart a little bit, but you understand, like, again, here's another example of like, oh, I can do this with this. So that's our first sort of juggling, I guess. We started with a delayed sound from the wet channel, moved it over to the micro looper, changed it around a little bit, reversed it, brought it back through the wet channel, changed it around, reversed it, added reverb, all those things. So Mood is not only completely aware of, oh, hey, there's two channels, it gives you, like, through a few clever routing things, I think primarily that the wet channel will go through the micro looper while it's quote-unquote always on. That lets you sort of juggle these sounds back and forth in conjunction with this routing knob. And so much flexibility comes from that. But that routing is a really, really important thing to memorize and an important thing to know you can play with. So I'm going to turn off our wet channel. Great. I'm going to show you the other modes for the micro looper here. So this left mode called envelope for our micro looper is in some ways the weirdest and in some ways the coolest. So I'm going to charge something in the micro loop here. Our length right now does nothing. clock does what it has been doing. The way this works, if I play any additional sound in, it'll freeze and repeat a section of the micro loop. Its sensitivity to sound is our modify, and the length of the section that loops is length up here. So if I take out our dry signal totally, it's literally just a way for me to pause this loop. And then I can run that through, say, a reverb. Bring back in some of my drive signal. And if I get the sensitivity low enough that I don't stop it for the whole time I have the note pressed, it just sort of makes it hang up for a second while I'm there. That, less of our, or longer loop. Just another kind of crazy, unique way to interact with these micro loops. Now, I'm going to show you something else I haven't shown you. The micro loops you can overdub. So there's a low sound. If I hold, on that right foot switch while it turned red, I overdubbed. And it overdubbed at that new clock speed. So now I have all these different little melodic twinkles recorded at different clock speeds. And they all shift and change differently. And of course, they'll do all the other same stuff that the micro loop was doing before. Like pausing. Great. Envelope is sort of the most particular one. It's sort of the most specific, I think. I think it really benefits from having another ambient delay or reverb pedal after it, and I think you need to be really, really careful about where you put your sensitivity to get it to do something, quote-unquote, that you would expect. Something, quote-unquote, expectant. But again, think about that same idea. Okay, when I use envelope, I don't have control over the length, certainly not with a knob. I don't have control over the length of my micro loop with anything other than the clock. But what I gain is the opportunity to pause it like that, to make it reactive to your playing. What part of the toolkit works for the sound you're trying to build? Okay, one last option on the micro loop here on its own. This is called stretch. And I need to charge the looper. That will work. So this is pretty different from the other one. So just like envelope, this length does not control our total length of the micro loop. Whenever you see it flash on the green, that is as long as it's always going to be. Tape is the only one that lets you reduce it after the fact. And our control here, modify, is split down the middle. So everything to the right is forward. Everything to the left is reverse. All the way to the left is not stretched. All the way to the right is not stretched. All the way left is reversed, not stretched. Just barely to the left of noon is most stretched, reversed. Okay? All the way to the right, no stretch forward. Just to the right of noon, most stretched forward. And I'll put the diagram they have in the manual up. And our length here is the size of the grain that sort of gets stretched, sort of gets smeared. And so while we aren't really changing the length, quote-unquote, of our loop, it's taking a lot longer to play without changing its pitch. Here's some of that artifacting because I'm doing pretty dramatic settings. I can get that sort of volume starting to be reduced by sacrificing a little bit of my slowness, a little bit of my stretch, or increasing the size of my grains a little bit. Clock now does exactly what you would think it does. Okay, I'm going to overdub while this is in these settings. And you'll notice the micro loop was recorded with respect to the clock speed, but not the reverse polarity, or so the reverse play mode, reverse direction. Important to remember. Reverb on top of it. Again, just another crazy way to find a sound like this. I think I'm going to pause and change instruments here. I think this is good to demonstrate a lot of the things I already did and get you a feel for like, okay, that's what can come out of the left channel, that's what can come out of the right channel, and a few glimpses at the way they interact. But I think for some of the other things I demonstrate, I might do better with synthesis. So I'm going to change to another instrument here. Here we are with my Juno 106. Running through Mood, and then an Empress Reverb, which will sound mostly like that a lot of the time. I'm going to show you some of the other hidden options I didn't show you, and options we have on the back with the dip switches. Do you guys know what the dip switches are? Double check my framing there. Should be able to see it. Everything on the left is about control. I'll do one more setup for advanced control and MIDI. That'll utilize those, but I'll show you a lot of things on the right. And the things on the right are like Chase Bliss's solution to having a hidden menu on something with no real way to get to one. I think they're very, very clever. And they can really fundamentally change the way things are working. So we're going to start with one that should be pretty audible. It's called Spread. And Spread will change the stereo behavior for actually all 6 modes, all 3 for the wet channel and all 3 for the looper. And so we're going to start with the easiest one to hear. It'll be delay. And I'm actually going to take out one channel of the Juno so you can hear it. Hope you're listening in stereo. But that's bouncing between the left and the right. If I plug in both the left and right of the Juno, because it's pretty much the same thing on the left and right, as they swap back and forth, you don't hear much of a change at all. But if I turn on another setting, I can sort of trick it. It's called MISO. Be this one. MISO is mono in, stereo out. So there's the sort of sum of our left and right, bouncing left and right. And MISO, not necessarily for use with a stereo input instrument, or stereo output, rather, instrument, if you're running a guitar or an electric piano or something. That was in mono. You would use MISO to have Mood be the way you introduce a stereo variation. Great. I'm going to turn MISO off, actually. But I will leave Spread on. Spread, so you hear it's ping-ponging for the delay, right? Let's show you the reverb. If I turn off the smearing, make it kind of heavy. Listen to your left and right. You hear different pinging. You hear different sort of individual repeats on the left and right. If I turn in the smearing, I find it's this very pleasant sort of modulated wash. Let's do a little bit of that. lovely modulated stereo wash. Slip, sort of unexpectedly, maybe. Let's get to something more abrupt again. And let's just do full wet, actually. Hear it panning right, left, right, left. Right, left, and as I turn up the clock, it moves faster. Because of course it does. Cool, it's almost like at full wet with the grain size, I guess. It's sort of doing like a panning thing. Love that. Great, that's all the wet channel stuff. I really like whatever combination of things I found right now. Anyway, all the options for the micro looper, they all are pretty different. Let's just do... where do I want to set this? About there, about there. If I just do like an ascending line... And I might have to mute one channel at a time so you can hear this if you're listening on phone or something. But here's the right channel, soloed on its own. And here's the left channel, soloed on its own. Here they are together again. The right channel is the forward direction, or I guess the direction of my setting here. And the left channel is the opposite of it. So if the right channel is forward, the left channel is reverse. The right channel is reverse, set on here. The right channel's reverse. Crazy cool. And it's sort of like stereo separation that's not traditional or expected or you know, even in some ways like a manageable behavior. It's just something kind of crazy. So if I give that like an ambient wash, like already, that could be the drone with which I lay pads over. Anyway, lovely, lovely, lovely. Also, depending on what you have in here for tape, that can be super, super, super distracting. So I'm actually just going to jump kind of out of order to another hidden option. There's a hidden option for spread on individually the wet channel or the micro looper. So if I go to our hidden options and turn this to the left, now, even though the spread dip switch is on, we don't have that stereo separation for what's going on in our micro loop. But if I turn on here for the delay... Okay, I've messed up my micro loop. I messed up my micro loop somehow, but you get the point. You can individually have the wet channel or the micro looper channel be spreading with a hidden function, which is this middle option here. And we've got one more option that relates to our spread function, our stereo panning. And it is the overall stereo width. So if I get a big reverb here. Full stereo width, that's the default. I can pull it down into mono. And then stereo separation. Great, so there's all sorts of options that come with that stereo imaging. There is how wide it is, which channels are experiencing or which channels are actually showing us a stereo separation. And then within all the individual modes, how are we stereo separating them? So I didn't show you stretch or envelope. They're both different versions of panning, spinning around your head, just like slip is. And I think you guys know what those are, and I need any opportunity to save time. This video is going to be so long already. Regardless, let's go. I'm literally just going to look at these dip switches and see what I haven't brought up yet. I'm going to turn off spread for the sake of sanity. Mono and stereo out. I showed you classic mode. Classic mode changes all sorts of behavior to match mood Mark 1. And so you have loop length as part of that, clock behavior is part of that, stretching on the delay for the wet channel as part of that, all sorts of things. I won't show you any of them. If it's important to you to have the same functionality, great. The behavior isn't that different enough for me to think it warrants its own segment like I did with generation loss. Dry kill, if you're using this as an insert effect, gives you a full wet mix. Trails, I'll turn on, and actually turn on Latch just while I have this turned up here because we'll show them both one right after the other. Trails, if I have something in the wet channel that hasn't quite decayed yet, and I turn it off, it will continue, and the effects will still be affected by knob changes. Great if you're turning the wet channel on and off in the middle of a performance. Latch lets us, whatever the hold function is for each of these foot switches, so for the left, it's an infinite hold, and I don't have to hold it on it. It's great for using it with your hands, and then playing over that. Let that ring out. For the micro looper, actually, there's probably something in there already. It is an overdub, as I showed you already. And the new stuff you record gets recorded with respect to the sort of clock positioning. So you can let that hang out as constantly overdubbing. And then just one tap will turn it off. And then hold again for overdub. Love that. Sort of related to that, Latch, there's a bunch of other things we can do with this micro looper channel to sort of change its behavior from really, I think, what you would expect it would only be able to do. So, for one, there's a hidden feature called fade. So I'm going to, actually, I'll start with just a primed micro loop. Here's a primed micro loop, and if I turn on fade, which is hidden in this tab right here, so there's our micro loop, implement fade, and then turn on overdub, and this will sort of listen to the micro loop every time it goes by. It gets quieter, right? And if I play over it, that gets brought in at full volume. So you can think of this like a really, really slow delay. Or if you have it on, say, more subtle settings and you've got more ambience running after it, this could sort of be a way to have your micro loop really shift and change over time. Made possible by the hidden function fade, the dip switch option for Latch, and the overdubs. And combined with that, we can introduce our dry micro loop, which I have definitely showed you already. Cool. So just because I will forget it, fade back up. Turn both of those off. I'm just going to check the manual here, make sure I'm not forgetting any of these hidden options, because in my brain notes, that was all the ones I had to show you. You can have the loop length, which is nice. Nice to have the option on envelope and stretch. Sync. So the way sync works, it's this left switch with the hidden options, and it will either sync the micro looper to the wet channel or vice versa. So when I hold these and move this switch to the left, micro looper length is affected by my time here on the delay. You can see it flashing faster and slower. And so if I bring this really, really short, that's all that I got out of my micro loop. But don't think of it like that. Think of it as a way to have these be related. I want this on so I can hear my time. I want to be on delay. Full length. Really short. You can hear it stretch out as I change our time over here as well. Crazy. So here's full length. I can speed that up. Some more feedback. So a partial division is the full length of our micro loop. Great. There is a hidden option, of course, for the opposite. I can have the length of the micro loop dictate sort of the time division of our wet channel. And so now this delay is always a subdivision of that length. Tough to hear because everything gets so washy, but a cool option nonetheless. I'm going to turn that sync off. Again, checking the manual to see if there's anything I forgot. I don't really think so. There's a relative balance of the two channels, but so then you have a blend between each wet channel and a blend between wet and dry. So really 4 channels of a mixer, is that right? 3 channels of a mixer. So really complete control over mixing all 3 of them, albeit a little convoluted. As I mentioned earlier, it would be awesome if this was like a 2.5, 3 times size enclosure. How nice would it be to have individual levels for dry in each channel? I would really, really appreciate that. Along with a lot of these options I've shown you, sync to not be on a hidden function would make a lot more people think about how they were able to use it, along with the sort of fade control that changes the entire idea of what the micro looper can be. So I love that these options are here, and I love that Chase Bliss has thought about, how can we implement something that is pretty simple to understand, but will really, really change the way people are able to use this. Boy, do I really wish we had hands-on control to a lot of these, because there are people who will not look at the hidden channels. I think Chase Bliss, people who buy Chase Bliss, probably a higher percentage of those people are ready to use advanced features, but so many of them won't ever do it, and it might be the one thing that makes it perfect for them. There is one more semi-related to that sort of micro-looping thing called no dub. That no dub just means your micro-loop will never repeat. So if fade was all the way at 0, and that never had... while you were overdubbing, that fade was all the way at 0. You can sort of use the microlooper channel as real-time effects or close to real-time effects. I haven't found any great use for it, but again, it's another point of flexibility, so I'm happy to have it. But I won't show you. And then smooth is the last one. I'll leave trails and latch on probably forever. Those are 2 things that I, especially the way I use this with my hands, I'll always leave on. But smooth lets you, let me charge the microloop again. The way smooth works, you're not locked into these increments on the clock. You can smoothly blend between them. I can see a song beginning or ending like that, certainly. Because I had trails on, that persists. Very, very cool. Great. I tried to do that fast. I don't know that I succeeded. I think that was still about 20 minutes. But I've got one more setup, and that's for advanced control. So I'm going to set up MIDI. I've got one more setup that's for advanced control and some MIDI stuff. So let's move over to that. Okay, here we are with my trusty MPC Live 2. That is the audio running into Mood. And I have MIDI coming out of the MPC Live 2. Yes, Mood Mark II is fully MIDI controllable. And I say fully, it really is everything. So it could be these knobs, it could be the positions of these toggles. You can bypass each side independently. All these, it is well and truly anything on the pedal can be controlled with MIDI CC and a few other tricks as well. How am I getting MIDI into here? Well, this is a normal 5-pin DIN out of the MPC Live 2 into a Type B adapter. That is the poly-end style. And then a normal 3.5mm to 1/4 inch adapter. So this is a Type B adapter sized up to 1/4 inch into the control jack. In the manual and online, they describe using... Chase Bliss has a MIDI box. That's like a guitar pedal sized, guitar pedal powered thing. And that makes sense for guitar players and pedal boards like that. But this is like an easy enough solution for synth people. I know that it's not probably their main audience, but there are lots of people who are using Chase Bliss effects with synths. And we've already got another tiny jack on the side. We've already got the USB port. What about 2 3.5mm MIDI in and out, huh? I would love to send MIDI out of this as well. Regardless, it defaults to channel 2, so I'm on channel 2. And there's a lot to show you. How should I do this? I think I'll just load the micro looper with something. That's fine. Then I can, like, manipulate the wet channel, etc. Yeah, okay. Let's start with that. So this is in the micro looper. I hope you can see the MPC screen. I'm going to do my best to make it visible. But here on track 2, I have set up a bunch of Q links. And these send out specific MIDI CCs. The hard part about this, my second camera is my cell phone, so I don't have any reference for the MIDI CCs, because that's not something that's included in the manual. All the MIDI stuff is online. Anyway, so I have all these MIDI CCs set up to change different parameters while something's running. So this first one is the clock. Great, and that would work smoothly if I had the smooth dip switch turned on, or I could change the dip switch, with a MIDI CC. I have bypass for the wet side on this CC. So you see as I pull it up, then that light turns on. These bottom 2 knobs are the controls for the wet channel. You get it. I could do any of that. And of course, with any MIDI CC value, we can automate that over time. So if actually this will be a good place to watch it. I can draw in clock changes. So even if all this is doing is effectively setting an LFO for the clock, I can still do that here. That could be pretty radical. And of course, your automation can be less, what's the right word to say, purposeless than that. I could have something pre-recorded, and at certain moments, I could turn our effect on or off. Or I could punch in reverb just for a section that needed it. If I say I wasn't using the micro loop, if I was just running something through this, I only want reverb on this passage, turn it on there. you could be playing live and have the control changes automated. You could have the MIDI sequence running through it, be pre-recorded, and the control changes be automated, or vice versa. All sorts of flexibility. That's really what MIDI allows you, is flexibility in how you approach performance and how you control this thing. Because now that these things are not static over time, especially if mood is incorporated into a track and, you know, not just being used as like a sourced or sampled material, the addition of MIDI makes it completely dynamic. And I also, and wonderful, there is a mode, it's called synth mode on this. How exciting is that? Not exactly what you're thinking, but let me record a micro loop that's just a single note. Actually, I'll go a little higher. So that's just the micro loop now. You hear it recorded there. So if I go to track 2, and now I send a MIDI note value, okay, so as if I was plugging in a keyboard to mood. You can control the clock chromatically with the keyboard value, which is so cool. There are 2 other modes. That first one was always... This first one, this is MIDI CC 58. That first one is 0. That's always on. That's as if mood was doing exactly what it always had, except now you're changing the clock with a keyboard. This is sort of... I can't remember the name of it, and I can't check the manual because it's on my phone. But this is sort of a gated on and off. So as long as I'm holding a note, it will play out, and anything above that, so now I'm MIDI CC58 is value 2 or above, and I have this bank of Q links set up to control the built-in envelope. So there is an ADSR built in. And I have reverb on so you can hear it also changes the clock, of course, to affect the wet channel. Which is crazy. That is MIDI CC's, 80, 81, 82, and 83. Give you the ADSR. Still monophonic, of course, because you only have one thing in the micro loop or whatever. It makes the most sense to me if I go back to this row on CC58 to leave it in the always on mode. But the idea that this could be like a granular synth is kind of nutty. There is a CC to get out of synth mode. That's 59. If you send it anything other than 0, it will get you out of synth mode. To get back into synth mode, you just need to send a note. You just need to send it a note. And then once you're in there, the CC that normally controls the clock won't do anything. It's only the CC, or it's only the note value that'll change the clock. Portamento works. While you're on the gated or ADSR play modes, I kind of really wish that Portamento worked all the time. I would love for Mood's clock controller to still be locked to these steps, but to have... I would love if Mood's clock was still latched to these steps, but the values sort of had a variable glide between them. Because what if I want to crank it up, but I still want it to be an even interval, or crank it down, but have it slowly ramp down to where I was? I think if there's any like little hidden feature, and this is such a like specific use case, but I would love if that Portamento worked all the time. Or there was a separate CC to let the Portamento work in the always on mode. So I could do dive bombs that still landed on a reasonable note. Anyway, I'm doing this fast and very rote because the two things, and I hope you agree that this is true. If you're interested in MIDI, interested in using MIDI to control it, you will be doing enough research and you will know what's important to you and valuable to you. But this is enough for you to go, oh my God, I didn't know I could control that with MIDI. And I'm here to show you that Mood makes it easy to talk about because it's everything, which is just wonderful. So, but yeah. That, of course, all remains true with a more interesting micro loop, let's say. Of course, you can sequence those notes and have everything that I was just doing live manually run into here. And you can even do that if I leave that in the micro loop, but go just to the delayed side or the reverb side. I make that just on the input. I can have those sequence changes affect what I'm actively playing in live. So if I... So right now, while the clock is getting changed, so there you go. Sequence clock changes on the delay. Honestly sounds quite cool. But if I bring back our micro loop, it's still doing what we had it doing before. And I can combine this with controlled CCs over all the other parameters, even things like the hidden options like you just saw me changing, the blend between the wet and the micro looper sides. All that stuff can be automated. And you know, I've been working on this so long, I think that's all I really need to say for MIDI. I think I need, this section has to be short. I don't want this video to be more than an hour. It's almost an hour already. Nobody will see this now if they aren't particularly interested in MIDI. But I hope I've made my case that Mood as a set of tools is completely unmatched in working in a sort of ambient environment. Nothing else really can get to the component level that this does, or do as many different things. All these little components of another good ambient sound can be really particularly specifically controlled in here. Slip lets you harmonies in reverse. You can accomplish reverse elements with the micro loops, on and on and on and on. And I think that honestly makes it really special, because so many of the ambient pedals are about simply getting to the end and having something be big and washy. But I think Mood is best used when you step very carefully through a few different steps and you add these elements of ambiance and you let one moment dictate the next. You find something that sounds good and you capture that in the micro loop. The micro loop does something interesting. You want to space it out a little bit. And you have this sort of back and forth cycle. Maybe you overdub. You get this sort of tiered creation to this texture, to this sound. This series of moments becomes one collective thing, and I think that's crazy, crazy unique. Nothing else has made me feel that way. So anyway, cheers Chase Bliss for sending this over, and especially cheers Chase Bliss for making stuff like this. The fact that there's a market for this is awesome. I'm very happy that we're at a point in the music gear world where something this particular, something this specific can not only be made, but be popular and be good. So anyway, I'm very, very happy to have presented it to you. My name is Jorb. I love gear. That certainly includes Mood. Thanks for watching. Cheers and so long.